In the middle of 2020, when the country was neck-deep in the coronavirus pandemic, the Modi government set up a group of ministers and gave them a very important task. Their mandate was not to discuss how to manage the rising cases of COVID-19 or to tackle the migrant crisis disaster, but to manage the image crisis the government was facing. The full GOM report was leaked on the internet recently and provides fascinating details about what the government would like to do. From wanting to neutralize people who write against the government to tracking negative influencers and color-coding journalists, the report is brimming with insights into the processes that are already in motion to curb press freedom. What's worse, some of the most questionable suggestions in the report apparently came from journalists themselves. Guided by the insights and vital inputs of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, 9 key ministers began their anxious search last year to figure out why news of the supposed success of government policies wasn't reaching the people. They didn't consider the possibility that this was perhaps because there may not have been many successes. But let's set that question aside for now. The ministers met with a range of eminent personalities, from Sangh Parivar loyalists to prominent persons from the media field, all joined in this endeavor of fixing the government's communication strategy. But to what end exactly? And should journalists really be concerned about how the government manages its image? In the wake of a story in Caravan magazine about their apparent participation in the GOM process, several journalists have said that their views have been exaggerated or distorted and that they were under the impression that the meeting they held with the ministers was off the record. But the government has not denied the authenticity of its report, and strangely, none of the journalists named have publicly protested to the government about the apparent misuse of their names in an official document. Much like a toolkit, the GOM report contains suggestions and comments of the many disturbing observations that have been made by both the ministers and the eminent media personalities. A few of them stand out as extremely worrying. According to the report, Minister of Minority Affairs Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi suggested a strategy of neutralization. We should have a strategy to neutralize the people who are writing against the government without facts and set false narratives / spread fake news. Ironically, this report also contains the eminent observation of RSS ideologue Swaminathan Gurumurthy, who bluntly suggests news to carry mixture of truth and untruth. Now, it isn't clear if Gurumurthy and the report itself are endorsing official disinformation. But what is certainly clear, given past incidents, is that fact-checking isn't really the government's strong suit. The PIB fact-checked, which is a fact-checking arm of the Press Information Bureau, has itself been accused of promoting fake news. Whether it's claiming that a genuine recruitment notice issued by the Intelligence Bureau was incorrect, or declaring news reports on the deaths of migrant workers in Shramik trains as false without providing any substantial evidence, the credibility of the government's fact-checking unit remains questionable. Ironically, one of the journalists, Abhijit Majumdar, a former editor of Mail Today, made 2 comments. He says, alt news propaganda is vicious, and he wants the government to support a pro-government website that is notorious for promoting fake news. Calling a respected independent non-profit fact-checking website like Alt News propaganda, supporting fake news purveyors, suggesting that news should carry a mixture of truth and untruth, and then suggesting the neutralization of those who write against the governments without facts, all of these emerge as prime ingredients of the Modi government's communication strategy. Amongst a few of the bizarre suggestions made by the ministers in the report is tracking 50 negative influencers and 50 positive influencers, essentially meaning a list of blacklisted and whitelisted individuals which the government will keep an eye on. Add to this is the suggestion apparently made by the defense reporter Nitin Gokhale. According to the report, he says, journalists can be color-coded: green, fence-sitters; black, against; and white, who support. We should support and promote favorable journalists. Gokhale has denied saying this, but has not revealed whether he has taken up this apparent misrepresentation of his views with the ministers who have quoted him in their report. Shekhar Iyer, a former political reporter for the Hindustan Times, reportedly observed this: the relationship between editor and the government encourages adversarial approach adopted by the reporters. There is need to have a system whereby the reporter can explain the build-up leading to major decisions as to why such decision was taken. This would lead to reporting based on facts and not on adversarial reporting. In other words, what is being alluded to here is the creation of a system where reporters shouldn't act as a watchdog of the government and its policies, but rather as collaborators working to advertise its decisions. Bizarre for a democracy, yes, but it gets worse. The editor of a pro-government propaganda website was also party to this meeting, according to the report, and her single point suggestion was that her propaganda website should be promoted by the government. Charming. Some of the other bizarre suggestions in the GOM report include watching the WhatsApp groups of various communities, making former army officers ask questions to leaders of opposition parties, roping in right-wing parties of other countries to find common ground, and so on. What makes this report particularly worrying is that some of its suggestions have already been implemented. On page 7, the report notes that steps have been taken to ensure that the news reporting on digital media is not biased primarily due to its foreign investment component, by restricting the role of FDI in digital news. This admission is in stark contrast to the official rationale put forward by PIB last year, where it said that the 26% FDI cap was because the government wants to level the playing field for print and digital media. It is now clear that the FDI cap was always about curbing supposed anti-government bias and nothing to do with leveling the playing field. The report also mentions the suggestion of Kanchan Gupta, a distinguished fellow of the Observer Research Foundation. He suggests the Communist Party of China's donation to Rajiv Gandhi Foundation can be used to build a story. 2 days later, the same pro-government propaganda website, which was promoting itself during this meeting, ran a story. In the next few days, the coverage expanded.
The Vadra Trust took money from the Chinese embassy.
These are hard facts, these are documents in black and white, and these show you the relationship that exists between the Congress Party and China.
Although it isn't clear whether the government will implement the other, more draconian observations in this report, it is nonetheless a defining moment in the curbing of press freedom. One where the government intends to market its narratives on the backs of the very people meant to be its watchdogs, the journalists.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.